see you guys in the dark.
In my 8th grade year, I moved in with a family member after my mother passed away. And this family member lived pretty far into the country. Because of this, I had to ride the school bus to my new school. I used to live in town before the move, so this was my first time on a bus. In the morning, there were about 6 or 7 students on the bus, and I was the first person to be picked up, and the last one to be dropped off after school. For the first few weeks of school, everything seemed fine. The students were quiet. Everyone kept to themselves, headphones in and whatnot. Being the first to get on, I always headed straight to the back of the bus to avoid everyone. Not that I wanted an issue with anyone. I was just socially awkward, and the more people I would avoid talking to, the better. As for the bus driver, we can call him Tom. He seemed like a normal bus driver. He didn't say a word to anyone and just did his job. He began getting a little friendlier to me when he dropped me off, since I was the last to get off, and it was never anything strange. It was a smile and a "see you in the morning" or "have a nice night." Nothing I would ever suspect. Things continued like this for a little while. Nothing exciting happening until, being 15 years old, who had just lost her mother, decided to go through a giant tantrum and beg that I no longer wanted to live with this family member. I missed the more populated city, my old friends, and my old school. So, about 2 months into going into this school, I decided to move back home with another family member. This is where the story shifts. On the last week of my bus rides, I told Tom that I would no longer be taking his bus anymore, as I was homesick and moving back home. He asked me to sit up towards the front of the bus for the rest of the week so that he could say goodbye a little bit better. I didn't think anything of it. He was a 40 to 50-year-old man who never gave me any red flags. Anyways, I listened and moved to the seat right behind him so that he could look at me through the large mirror above him and we could chat a little bit. It all seemed innocent at first. He asked about my mother, why I was leaving, and what I wanted to do when I grew up. The last few days of riding the bus, the questions got stranger, and I may not have been able to see the signs of a creep. But I knew the questions weren't things a middle-aged man should be asking a teenage girl. If anything, I thought he was just being nosy. He asked me if I had a boyfriend, if I had my first kiss yet, and what an ideal date for me would be. I answered honestly, but with a weird feeling in my stomach. Gut feelings are usually 100% real. On my final day riding the bus, as I got on, Tom asked me if I would sit in the front again, but wait until everyone else was off the bus. I agree, going back to the past seat in the back of the bus, and waited until everyone got off. I moved to the seat behind him again, but this time he didn't say anything to me. I probably should have mentioned earlier, but from the last stop before me, and my stop, there was about a 20 to 30 minute drive distance. I'd say that he didn't say a word to me for about 20 minutes of that time. I sat listening to my music until he pulled the bus over. We were on the road, and I knew my family member's house was close ahead, yet he pulled over and stopped the bus. If I could explain to you the fear that ignited in me when the bus came to a halt, and Tom turned in his chair so that he was facing me with a smile on his face, I would. I had seen one too many movies with creepy men doing things they shouldn't be doing to teenage girls, and expected the worst. I was expecting to be assaulted, harmed, kidnapped, or maybe even killed, but it never came to that. Instead, Tom told me to take my phone out and add his number to it. He said that he would be here if I needed to talk about my mother, telling me the story of his own mother, and things that I can't really remember. I just remember it being an innocent conversation. No matter how weird you might think it is for a bus driver to offer a teenage girl his number, he dropped me off after that, and we said our goodbyes. Years passed, and I was in 10th grade when I saw Tom again. I still had his number in my contacts, but I never contacted him, even when things got rough, because truly, what girl would call a strange bus driver when she needed help? Definitely not me. I was at Walmart with a few friends, and we decided to split up to get the things we individually needed. I headed off to get a box of Q-tips when I heard someone say my name. I could tell that it was a male's voice, and I figured it would just be a male teacher that I had. It was Tom, but I couldn't tell at first. He had grown out of his facial hair, and I honestly had just forgotten about him. But once again, he said hello to me. I remembered everything. I wasn't necessarily scared. I just found it odd that this man, who was my bus driver for a few months, remembered me after over 2 years. It was a simple conversation. He asked how I had been, and how high school was going for me. I answered, not really bothered to ask how he was. We said our goodbyes, and I met back up with my friends, explaining to them the whole story of Tom, to which they all found it scary that I never told anyone my bus driver gave me his number, and asked me strange questions. I explained I thought he was just being friendly, because I truly did. I haven't seen Tom in person since then. Years have gone by. I'm in college, and I thought that the story was over by then. Just an overly friendly bus driver. It couldn't have stayed innocent, right? About a month ago, I was talking to someone I went to school with at the other school, and I mentioned to her how scared I was thinking about the bus out there because of Tom. She was shocked I had mentioned him, and asked for the full story. I told her a summary of it, the questions, the stopping the bus to give me his number, the encounter at Walmart. I told her he just gave me the creeps, and I hoped that I would never see him again. This was when I found out Tom had been arrested for sexually assaulting 2 minors. She not only showed me his mugshot, but told me what had happened. My story nearly lined up perfectly with these 2 other children. Bus driver who asked personal questions, offered his phone number and comfort to children with trauma, and acted on it. The only difference was I got out of there. If I hadn't moved back to my hometown, I still wonder what could have happened to me. I'm extremely lucky that I never contacted his number, and feel sorry for the 2 kids that did contact him, feeling they could trust this man. I know you're in jail, Tom, and are not getting out for quite a while, but please, if you see me in public, don't try to come up to me ever again. About 6 years ago, a little info about myself. I'm a 23-year-old female. I'm also very small, 4'11", and weigh about 95 pounds. My 11th grade year of high school is when this event took place. It was within the first 2 weeks of school, and I was a bus rider. We had a new bus driver. Me being a very social person, I always thanked him for his service, and was always super nice to him, and I believe that's where I messed up. One day after school, I was riding the bus. I was always one of the first to be dropped off, so when I realized that I had been on the bus for an extra 10 minutes, I was a little curious, and just chalked it up to the fact that the bus routes get changed all the time. At this point, I have been on the bus for about 30 minutes, and there are 2 kids left on the bus. An old friend of mine, and of course myself. This friend of mine lived in a very remote location, and there was absolutely no self-service out there, so when we dropped her off, I couldn't call my parents to let them know what was happening. As we were leaving this area, the bus driver pulled into a cemetery and told me to look out my window. When I did, I saw a torn to shreds baby deer. My whole body went into shutdown mode. I didn't know what to do. My initial reaction was to pull out my phone and call my parents, when I remembered that I had no signal. I immediately got up and ran to the back of the bus. Keep in mind, I'm the only kid on this bus. We sat by the deer for a good 10 minutes, and the whole time I'm in the back, my blood is absolutely boiling. It was everything in me to not run off that bus and look for help. When we started to leave, he just started talking about random stuff, like how he loves his wife and loves his job as a bus driver. The whole time he's barely paying attention to the road. I get on my phone and to go Google Maps. I realized my house was 15 minutes from where we were, and I was super excited to be going home soon. I was wrong. This jackass then decides to take a shit ton of back roads and keeps talking to me. The whole time I'm sitting in silence, still with no service on my phone. So about 20 to 25 minutes later, I start seeing landmarks that are around my neighborhood. I look down and there's service on my phone. I immediately call my dad. He doesn't answer. Not even 2 minutes later, we pull into my neighborhood, and he drops me off at my house. I wanted to run out, but for some reason I just stood in my yard and stared at him, frozen in fear. Eventually he pulled off, and when he did, I took off running into my house. My parents were in their room freaking out about where I was. My mom started grilling me about where I was and what I was doing. On a normal day, I would get home at like 2:30, so my mom was very upset. My dad's phone was dead because he tried to call so many times. I began to cry and tell them everything that had happened. My dad was furious and called my school. He used my mom's phone to record the whole conversation between my dad, the principal, and myself. My principal was extremely pissed off about what had taken place, as was my dad. My mother was just cuddling me, asking me if I was okay, and if anything else had happened. I didn't go back to school for about 2 days. There was no formal investigation. The school handled it themselves. The bus driver denied everything, and when they checked camera footage, the camera happened to be covered by a sticker or something of the sort. Thankfully, nobody believed the bus driver, and he was fired. I haven't rode a bus ever since then. I know it's not really the most creepy thing, as most stories are, but it's mine, and it's still the most bone-chilling experience that I've ever had. I met him about 4 years ago in the summer before going into the 11th grade, and since I failed math, I was given the choice to either retaking it in 11th grade or completing the course over the summer. I chose to go to summer school, and my class was 3 hours long. At the end of the day, I would sit by the bus stop for what felt like half an hour. I saw different bus drivers when I first attended this particular school, but that changed once I met one who stood out to me. Not because of his looks, but rather because he would always try to talk to me. I'm going to refer him as X, because I never really knew his name. He looked Jamaican. Maybe, I don't know for sure. He appeared to be in his late to mid-30s, or possibly in his early 40s. Keep in mind, I was 14 at the time. He knew that because he had asked me. At first, it started out with him smiling at me. Then it quickly turned into small talk, and he would ask me questions about how school was, if I was doing okay, things like that. After a while, he then asked me to sit at the seat that was closest to him whenever I declined or sat somewhere further away. He would insist, and I gave in every single time, and he would always talk to me and watch me in the rearview mirror while driving to the subway station. X was always happy to see me, always started the conversations, and kept them going. If I can remember correctly, he would compliment me at times, saying that I looked pretty. At some point, it got even more weird. For instance, when I was sitting at the bus stop, and the bus eventually came, I avoided eye contact, and he wouldn't open up the doors. The second I look at him, he would open them with a big smile on his face, and then greeted me. I noticed this became a pattern, but I thought that maybe I was being paranoid, or overthinking it, so over the next few days, I avoided eye contact and looked at the ground or my phone for maybe 5 to 10 seconds, and he still would not open the doors until I made eye contact with him. I found that so weird, and my best friend at the time would not believe me about this bus driver. So one day I decided to show her what was happening, and she was pretty shocked. She told me to stay away from him, but I couldn't since the other bus would take so long to come. This continued the rest of the summer school, and I hoped that I never saw him after my course was over. Unfortunately, I ran to him when I was a little older. I was in the side of the subway that goes southbound, and there he was, now working as a train operator. At first, I didn't realize that it was him, as I tend to forget faces, but we locked eyes. He waved at me and smiled. I immediately knew that it was him. He was trying to talk to me, saying, "Hey, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while." It was rather awkward. I said that I'm good with a polite smile, and thankfully we went our separate ways. Even though our conversation was cut short, he made me feel uncomfortable and still gave me pedophile vibes. I ran into him once again, a couple of months later. I was on northbound side, and the train had stopped and gone out of service. There was a man who was walking into the train to make sure that no one was there. I forgot what he had looked like, so I didn't recognize him at first. But I did once he saw me, and had this huge smile on his face, and mouthed, "Hey," while waving at me. I am, again, very awkward, and mouth back, "Hi." And then he asked me, "How am I doing?" To which I reply with, "I'm good." He then proceeded to ask me something, but I could not make out what he mouthed. I looked confused. He then grabbed his phone and mouthed, "Can I have your number?" I said no, sorry. He asked me, "Please?" and does a praying hands gesture. I shook my head, and then he smiled and said, "Okay, that's fine," and waved goodbye. Continued to walk into the train. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. He came back to where I could see him again and made a heart with his hands, and then blew me a kiss. He walked away. Came back like 2 seconds later and blew me another kiss. I was pretty shaken up about it. I may not remember his face, but I will always recognize that smile and that hey. So to the creepy guy who asked me for my number when I was underage, and then blew me 2 kisses in the subway, I really think you're creepy, dude. Stop trying to talk to me. So when I was 15, I was completely incorrigible and hung out with some not-so-great people. My main friend group hung out at this house that we dubbed our house. Our house was technically a foreclosed property that had previously been owned by one of my friend's parents. The parents had moved out and left their 2 adult children, who were the siblings of my friend my age, living at the house. Anyway, every single day after school, my friends and I would meet up with the older siblings at our house and get absolutely hammered. Around 4 p.m., everyone would show up with fifths and drugs, and it was just a constant party every night. Things were pretty much out of control there. One night we were all drunk, as usual, and I got into a fight with my boyfriend. I decided that I wanted to leave, but no one would drive me home, and the buses had stopped running. It was late, probably around 12 or 1 a.m. I lived 6 miles away, and this was an urban area that was sketchy to walk about at night. But I was pissed and drunk, so I told everyone to go fuck themselves, and then I left. I got 3/4 of the way home without any incident. I hadn't seen a single car or person, and while I was kinda scared, I was feeling more confident the closer that I got home. I was crossing the freeway overpass that glides into the valley where my neighborhood is. All of a sudden, I hear a whirring noise and these lights coming from behind me. I look over my shoulder and see a bus coming up beside me. The destination mark is blank and the lights inside are dim. I turn away and keep walking, and as the bus gets closer, it slows down and drives right next to me. This goes on for maybe 30 seconds when I start feeling genuinely uncomfortable and glance upwards. The bus stops and the driver opens up the door. He's not wearing a uniform. I still remember him pretty clearly. 50-something, salt and pepper hair, medium length for a man, thick darker gray beard, copper wire rimmed glasses. He leans against the driver's wheel and looks me up and down. "You look really young," he says. And I, like an idiot, stutter that I'm 15, thinking like most 15-year-olds, that 15 isn't very young. He smiled slowly and said this is a dangerous area to be walking alone, and there are all types of men out there. Why don't I get on the bus? Now, I may have been drunk, I may have been 15, and I may have been deludedly self-confident, but I wasn't that stupid. Something just didn't feel right. I told him no thank you, and quickly started walking again. For a while, the bus behind me didn't move, and then I heard its brakes lift, and I started creeping up behind me again. By this time, I'm over the bridge and walking down a sidewalk with an apartment complexes on the other side. The bus pulls up again and opens its doors while following me. The man again tells me that it's not safe and asks me to get on the bus. I told him no, I'm really almost home. It's fine, and I start walking even faster. He closes the doors, but keeps the bus keeping pace with me, and I'm really starting to worry. Finally, I decided to just run. So I start running, and at first I put some distance between myself and the bus, but he's still right behind me. I slow down when I feel far enough away and catch my breath, but keep on walking. Next thing I know, the bus starts gaining on me again and honks its horn. I screamed and fell over, still super drunk and now very scared. I got up and scurried into the neighborhood at my side and hid behind one of the carports. I could still see the road, and the bus had stopped. Its doors opened, and the man came to the doorway and looked out both directions. He lingered there for a moment, and then I heard him say, "Shit," and he got back to his seat, closed the doors, and drove away. It took me another 30 seconds to get home, even though it was less than a mile. I took a convoluted way through some bushes, yards, and apartment complexes, terrified that the bus was still cruising around looking for me. So, to that bus driver all those years ago, you creeped me out, and I definitely wouldn't get on your bus, even today. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.